The sun was setting over the small town of Willow Creek, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The streets were quiet, except for a few people hurrying home after a long day. Everyone seemed to be heading somewhere familiar, somewhere safe. But for one woman, this evening wasn't like any other. Her name wasn't important right now, but her story? Oh, that was about to change forever. She stood outside the church where she had dreamed of starting a new chapter in her life just hours earlier. She was still wearing her wedding gown, a beautiful dress made of white lace and shimmering beads. It fit her perfectly, just as she'd imagined it would on her special day. But instead of walking down the aisle hand in hand with the man she loved, she found herself standing alone, heartbroken and confused. He had left her at the altar without a word, without an explanation. Just gone. Her mind replayed the scene over and over again. The guests whispering, the awkward silence when everyone realized something was wrong. The way he avoided looking at her as he walked away. She couldn't believe it. How could someone plan such a big moment in their life and then throw it all away? Tears streamed down her cheeks as she tried to make sense of what had happened. But no matter how hard she thought about it, nothing added up. Feeling lost and humiliated, she wandered aimlessly through the quiet neighborhood. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed to get away from the church, away from the memories of what should have been the happiest day of her life. As she walked, her feet carried her toward the park at the edge of town. It was a place she used to visit as a child, a spot filled with old swings, tall trees, and a bench overlooking the lake. Maybe sitting there for a while would help clear her head. But before she could reach the bench, she heard a soft voice calling out to her. "Excuse me, miss, are you my mom?" Startled, she turned around quickly. Standing a few feet away was a little boy, no older than 6 or 7. His clothes looked worn, like they had seen better days, and his hair was messy, sticking out in all directions. In his arms, he clutched a stuffed rabbit tightly against his chest. His eyes were wide open, full of curiosity and hope, as if he truly believed she might be the answer to his question. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. Was this some kind of prank? A cruel joke played by someone who recognized her from the wedding disaster? No, the boy seemed sincere. There was no hint of mischief in his expression, only innocence and longing. Finally, she managed to find her voice. Kneeling down so she was closer to his height, she asked gently, "Why do you think I might be your mom?" The boy shrugged shyly, hugging the stuffed rabbit even tighter. "You look sad?" "Like me," he said softly. Then, after a pause, he added, "And you're wearing a pretty dress, like the one Mommy wore when she said goodbye." Her breath caught in her throat. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This wasn't just a random encounter. This little boy wasn't asking because he thought she resembled his mother physically. It was deeper than that. He saw her pain, her vulnerability, and it resonated with him. Perhaps he, too, knew what it felt like to lose someone important. "Where is your mommy now?" she asked carefully, trying not to pry too much but wanting to understand. He hesitated, looking down at his shoes. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. "She promised she'd come back someday, but that was a long time ago." Her heart sank. She didn't need to ask more questions to know that this boy had been through something heartbreaking. Whether his mother had passed away or simply disappeared, the result was the same. He was left waiting, hoping, clinging to memories of a promise that hadn't been kept. They sat together on the bench for a while, neither saying much at first. She watched as he absent-mindedly stroked the ear of his stuffed rabbit, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. The sun was almost fully set now, casting a faint glow over the park. Despite her own sadness, she couldn't ignore the connection forming between them. Here they were, two strangers brought together by loss, both searching for comfort in their own ways. After a few minutes, he glanced up at her and asked again, "So, are you my mom?" This time, the question hit her differently. It wasn't just about finding his mother anymore. It was about belonging, about feeling safe and loved. And though she didn't know what the future held, she felt a spark of something inside her, a flicker of purpose, maybe even hope. "I'm not your mom," she replied honestly, "but I can sit here with you for a while if you want." "Would that be okay?" He nodded eagerly, scooting closer to her on the bench. For the first time since the morning began, she felt a tiny bit lighter, like maybe things weren't completely hopeless after all. The woman and the little boy stayed on the bench for what felt like hours, though in reality it was probably only a short while. The park around them grew quieter as the last rays of sunlight faded away, leaving behind a soft glow from the streetlights nearby. She didn't know his name yet, and he hadn't asked for hers either. It was strange, but somehow neither of them felt the need to rush into introductions. They were just two people sharing a moment, a quiet understanding that words weren't always necessary. Finally, breaking the silence, she leaned forward slightly and said, "Do you want to tell me more about your mommy? What was she like?" The boy looked up at her, his eyes lighting up for a brief second before dimming again. He hesitated, as if trying to decide whether or not he could trust her with his story. After a moment, he nodded slowly. "She was really nice," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "She used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep, and she made the best pancakes, always shaped like animals." A small smile tugged at the corners of his lips, but it disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. "What happened to her?" she asked gently, careful not to push too hard. She could see the sadness creeping back into his expression, and she wanted him to feel safe enough to share without feeling pressured. He shrugged, hugging the stuffed rabbit closer to his chest. "One day, she told me she had to go away for a little while. She said she'd come back soon, but she never did." His voice cracked on the last few words, and he looked down at his shoes, avoiding her gaze that her heart ached for him. She knew what it was like to wait for someone who promised to return but never did. Though her situation wasn't exactly the same, the pain of abandonment was universal. Without thinking, she reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," she said softly. "That must have been really hard." He didn't respond right away, but after a moment, he nodded. Then, surprising both of them, he added, "But maybe she'll come back someday, right?" His question hung in the air between them, heavy with hope and longing. She didn't know how to answer. How do you explain to a child that sometimes people leave and never return? That promises, even ones made with the best intentions, can be broken? Instead of giving him an answer she wasn't sure of, she simply said, "I don't know. But I do know that you're brave for holding on to hope." For the first time since they'd met, the boy smiled a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. It was small, but it was there, and it warmed her heart in a way she hadn't expected. In that moment, she realized something important. This little boy wasn't just looking for answers. He was looking for connection, for someone who would listen, who would care. Even if only for a little while. As the minutes passed, they continued talking. He told her about living with his grandmother, who worked long hours at a factory to make ends meet. "She's really tired all the time," he explained. "Sometimes I help her clean the house or cook dinner, but mostly I play by myself." She listened intently, nodding along as he spoke. There was a loneliness in his voice that broke her heart. He didn't complain or ask for sympathy. He simply stated the facts of his life matter-of-factly, as if this was just how things were supposed to be. But deep down, she could sense that he craved companionship, someone to fill the void left by his absent parents. Eventually, she asked, "What's your name?" "Ethan," he replied, his voice suddenly brighter now that they were getting to know each other better. What's yours?" She hesitated for a split second, unsure if she wanted to reveal too much of herself. But then she remembered the vulnerability he had shown her, and she decided to meet him halfway. "You can call me, well, whatever you'd like," she said with a small laugh, "but most people just call me by my first name." Ethan grinned mischievously. "Okay, I'll call you Miss Pretty Dress Lady." She chuckled despite herself. "That works, I guess." They spent a little more time together, chatting about random things, his favorite cartoons, the cookies his grandmother sometimes baked, the games he liked to play outside. Despite everything he had been through, Ethan had a sweetness about him that was impossible to ignore. He wasn't bitter or angry. He was just resilient. And the more she learned about him, the harder it became to imagine walking away. When it started to get dark, she glanced at her watch and realized how late it had gotten. "Ethan, we should probably head home now," she said gently. "Where does your grandmother live?" He pointed toward a row of houses a few blocks away. "Over there. Do you want to walk me home?" Part of her wanted to say yes to see where. He lived to meet his grandmother to ensure he got back safely, but another part of her hesitated. She barely knew this boy, and showing up unannounced might not sit well with his family. Still, she couldn't bring herself to leave him alone. "Not yet. I'll walk you halfway," she compromised. "But I think it's best if I let you go the rest of the way yourself. Does that sound okay?" Ethan nodded, though there was a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. As they walked side by side, she noticed how small his hand looked compared to hers. He didn't hold on to her, but every now and then their fingers brushed against each other accidentally. Each touch sent a pang of protectiveness through her chest. This boy deserved so much more than what life had handed him. When they reached the halfway point, she crouched down to his level again. "Thank you for trusting me today, Ethan," she said sincerely. "It meant a lot to me." He smiled shyly. "Thanks for listening. Most people don't." Her throat tightened at his words. How could anyone ignore this sweet, thoughtful child? The world felt crueler than ever in that moment. Before she could say anything else, Ethan surprised her by wrapping his arms around her waist in a tight hug. "Will I see you again?" he asked, pulling back just enough to look up at her. She froze, caught off guard by the question. On one hand, she wanted to say no to remind herself that she had her own struggles to deal with and couldn't take on someone else's burdens. But on the other hand, she couldn't deny the bond they had formed, however fleeting it might seem. Finally, she nodded. "Yes, Ethan, you will," and with that promise, they parted ways. As she watched him disappear into the distance, she felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her: sadness, hope, confusion, and something else she couldn't quite put into words. Whatever it was powerful enough to keep her awake that night, replaying their conversation over and over in her mind. Little did she know, this chance encounter was only the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, she woke up with Ethan's face still lingering in her mind. She hadn't expected to think about him so much after their brief meeting, but there he was, his hopeful eyes, his quiet bravery, and that stuffed rabbit he held, onto like it was the most precious thing in the world. It wasn't just pity that kept him on her mind. It was something deeper. She couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, fate had brought them together for a reason. That afternoon, she found herself walking toward the park again, carrying a small bag of cookies she'd baked earlier. She told herself it was just a friendly gesture, nothing more. After all, what harm could come from checking in on him? If anything, it might cheer him up and maybe even give her a distraction from her own problems. When she arrived at the bench where they'd first met, Ethan was already there, sitting cross-legged on the wooden slats with his rabbit perched beside him. His face lit up when he saw her approaching. "Miss Pretty Dress Lady," he exclaimed, jumping to his feet. "I didn't think you'd really come back. I promised, didn't I?" She replied with a warm smile, holding out the bag of cookies. "And I brought these for you. I hope you like chocolate chip." Ethan's eyes widened as he peeked inside the bag. "Whoa, these are my favorite." He grabbed one eagerly and took a big bite, crumbs tumbling down his shirt. "Thank you." They sat together on the bench, munching on cookies and chatting about everything and nothing. Ethan told her about his day, how his grandmother had been too tired to play with him, how he'd spent most of the afternoon drawing pictures of animals in his notebook. She listened intently, laughing at his funny stories and nodding along when he talked about things that made him sad. As the days turned into weeks, their visits became a routine. Sometimes they met at the park. Other times she stopped by his house to say hello. His grandmother, though initially wary of a stranger showing interest in her grandson, warmed up to her after realizing her intentions were pure. "He talks about you all the time," the older woman admitted one evening, standing in the doorway as Ethan played inside. "You've done wonders for him." "Thank you." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Ethan began opening up to her in ways he never had before. He told her about his dreams of becoming an astronaut, about how he wished his mom could see him grow up, about the nights when he felt scared and alone. Each confession tugged at her heartstrings, making her want to do whatever it took to make his life better. One rainy Saturday afternoon, she invited Ethan over to her apartment for the first time. The place wasn't much, a modest living room with mismatched furniture, a tiny kitchen, and a single bedroom, but it was cozy. She figured baking cookies together would be a fun way to pass the time, and Ethan seemed thrilled at the idea. As they rolled out dough and cut shapes into stars and hearts, Ethan suddenly looked up at her with those same wide, curious eyes. "Can I call you Mom?" he asked abruptly, dropping the cookie cutter onto the counter. Her hands froze mid-motion, flour dusting her fingers. The question caught her completely off guard. She had known Ethan long enough to understand how deeply he craved a maternal figure in his life, but hearing him ask outright, to put it into words, was overwhelming. Her chest tightened, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. "Why? Why would you want to call me that?" she managed to ask, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan shrugged, looking down at the cookie dough. "You make me feel safe. Like maybe everything will be okay. And you're nice to me. That's what moms do, right?" Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. How could this little boy who had every reason to be angry or bitter be so full of love and trust? She wanted to tell him yes, to wrap her arms around him and promise she'd always be there. But the weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders. Being a mom wasn't something you stepped into lightly. It meant sacrifices, late nights, tough decisions. Could she handle that? She started, then stopped, unsure of how to continue. Finally, she knelt down so she was eye level with him. "Ethan, I care about you very much and I want to be here for you. But being a mom is a big job. Are you sure that's what you really want?" He nodded earnestly, his expression unwavering. "Yes, you're the closest thing I have to a mom." Now, her heart swelled with emotion and she pulled him into a tight hug. For the first time since her wedding day disaster, she felt truly needed, not because someone owed her something, but because someone genuinely wanted her in their life. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and beautiful all at once. ****Part 4. Facing the past ***. Over the next few months, their relationship deepened. Ethan began referring to her as Mom naturally, and though it still felt surreal to hear the word directed at her, she couldn't deny how much joy it brought her. They spent weekends baking, coloring, and playing board games. On weekdays, she picked him up from school whenever his grandmother was working late. Slowly but surely, she started to feel like part of a family again, a real, messy, imperfect family. But life has a way of reminding us that happiness often comes with challenges. One evening, as they were building a blanket fort in her living room, there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, a frazzled-looking woman stood on the other side, clutching a folder filled with papers. "Are you Ethan's guardian?" the woman asked bluntly. She shook her head, confused. "No, I'm just a friend." "Why?" The woman introduced herself as a social worker. Apparently, Ethan's grandmother had fallen ill and was no longer able to care for him. With no immediate relatives available to take custody, the state was stepping in to place him in foster care unless someone could legally adopt him. The news hit her like a punch to the gut. Foster care? The thought of Ethan being shuffled from home to home, losing the stability he'd finally found, was unbearable. She glanced back at him, still giggling as he draped blankets over chairs, oblivious to the conversation happening at the door. No matter what it took, she couldn't let that happen. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Adopting Ethan wasn't something she had planned for, but now that the possibility was on the table, she couldn't imagine letting him go. He had become such an integral part of her life, her anchor during some of her darkest days. Could she really navigate the legal system, deal with lawyers and paperwork, and convince a judge that she was capable of raising a child? Determined to find answers, she reached out to a local lawyer who specialized in adoption cases. The process, as it turned out, was daunting. Background checks, financial evaluations, home inspections, it seemed endless. But she threw herself into it wholeheartedly, attending meetings, filling out forms, and preparing her apartment for inspections. Every step of the way, she reminded herself why she was doing this, for Ethan. Meanwhile, memories of her ex-fiancé occasionally crept back into her thoughts. What would he think if he saw her now? Would he regret leaving her at the altar? Or would he argue that she wasn't ready for such a huge responsibility? At first, these questions haunted her, but over time, she realized something important. His rejection had led her straight to Ethan. Without that heartbreak, she might never have discovered the kind of love that truly mattered, the unconditional, selfless kind. Months passed and slowly, progress was made. The lawyer assured her that her case was strong, especially given the close bond she shared with Ethan. Still, the uncertainty weighed heavily on her. What if something went wrong? What if she failed him? One particularly stressful evening, Ethan walked into the kitchen while she was poring over adoption papers. "What are you doing?" he asked curiously, climbing onto the chair beside her. She sighed, setting the pen down. "Just trying to figure out how we can stay together forever." He tilted his head, puzzled. "Aren't we already staying together forever?" Her lips curved into a small smile. "Well, technically, we need permission from some people to make it official. But don't worry, I'm working on it." Ethan grinned confidently. "You'll do it. I know you will." His faith in her gave her strength. No matter how difficult the road ahead seemed, she vowed not to give up. This wasn't just about giving Ethan a stable home. It was about proving to herself and to the world that she was capable of being the person he believed she was. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. Dressed in her best outfit, she held Ethan's hand tightly as they walked into the fathened courtroom. Her heart pounded in her chest as the judge reviewed the case, asking questions and examining evidence. Time seemed to stretch endlessly until, finally, the gavel struck. "Congratulations," the judge announced with a smile. "You are officially a family." Tears streamed down her face as she hugged Ethan, who squealed with delight. From that moment on, he was officially hers and she was his. As they left the courthouse hand in hand, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Life may not have gone according to plan, but sometimes the greatest blessings come from the most unexpected places. The courtroom doors swung open, and the two of them stepped out into the bright sunlight. It was a crisp autumn day, with leaves swirling in the breeze and the smell of fresh air filling their lungs. For the first time in what felt like forever, she took a deep breath without the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her chest. They were officially a family now, no more questions, no more doubts. Just them, together. Ethan looked up at her, his eyes sparkling with excitement. So, we're really doing this? We're a family? She smiled, squeezing his hand gently. Yes, buddy. We're a family, forever. He let out a whoop of joy, jumping up and down on the sidewalk. Then, as if suddenly remembering something important, he stopped mid-hop and pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. I made you something, he said shyly, handing it over to her. Unfolding the paper carefully, she saw that it was a stick figure version of the two of them holding hands under a rainbow. Above the picture, written in wobbly block letters, were the words, asterisk, thank you for being my mom. Asterisk, her vision blurred with tears as she knelt down to hug him tightly. This is the best gift anyone's ever given me, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan giggled, hugging her back just as fiercely. Life didn't magically become perfect after that day, far from it. There were still challenges to face, moments of frustration, and days when both of them felt overwhelmed. But through it all, they leaned on each other. She learned quickly that being a parent wasn't about having all the answers. It was about showing up, even when things got tough. And Ethan? Well, he taught her how to find joy in the little things, the way the sun sparkled on puddles after a rainstorm, the sound of laughter during a tickle fight, the warmth of sharing. A meal together. One evening, as they sat side by side on the couch flipping through photo albums, Ethan pointed to an old picture of her wearing her wedding gown. Why aren't you married anymore? He asked innocently. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to bring that up so soon, or maybe ever. Taking a moment to collect her thoughts, she turned to him with a soft smile. Sometimes people think they're ready for something big, but then they realize they weren't quite right for each other. It happens. But doesn't that make you sad? He pressed, his brow furrowing with concern. It did for a while, she admitted. But you know what? If things had gone differently, if I hadn't been left at the altar, I might never have met you. And meeting you has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. Ethan beamed at her words, clearly pleased with himself. So I'm better than a husband? She laughed, ruffling his hair affectionately. Absolutely. You're way cooler. The months turned into years, their bond only grew stronger. Ethan thrived under her care, excelling in school and making friends easily. He loved sports, especially soccer, and she rarely missed one of his games, cheering loudly from the sidelines, even when her voice went hoarse. On weekends, they explored the town together, visiting museums, parks, and ice cream shops. Their home became a place filled with laughter, love, and the kind of chaos that comes with raising a child. On their first official Mother's Day together, Ethan surprised her with breakfast in bed, a slightly burnt toast topped with peanut butter and banana slices, alongside a glass of orange juice that sloshed dangerously close to spilling. He'd also made her another handmade card, this one decorated with glitter glue and stickers. Inside, it read, asterisk, Happy Mommy Day. Thank you for saying yes when I asked if you were my mom. You make every day special. Asterisk, tears streamed down her face as she hugged him tightly. You make every day special for me too, kiddo. That night, as they sat together watching a movie, she found herself reflecting on everything they'd been through. From that fateful evening in the park to the courtroom where their lives changed forever, it had been a journey neither of them could have predicted. But looking back, she realized that every twist and turn had led them exactly where they were meant to be. Ethan yawned loudly, snuggling closer to her under the blanket. "I love you, Mom," he murmured sleepily. "I love you too, sweetheart." She replied, kissing the top of his head, more than anything. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the comfort of their little family, she felt truly at peace. Life may not have gone according to plan, but sometimes the greatest blessings come from the most unexpected places. For her, that blessing came in the form of a little boy who once,